Thank you very much, Sam. Hello, everyone. Very nice to be here today and lovely to be part of something just so special, and really looking forward to talking with you for the next few minutes. So a little bit about me, I suppose, very short, is my background and experiences are really wrapped around developing and supporting people. That's really been the lifeblood of what I've been involved with for 30 plus years. And it was all born out really from a very special part of my life, growing up in Devon in the 1970s. A question that we used to ask a lot on many of our development programs was, who has had the greatest influence on your life? And this is really pertinent to me, but the greatest influence for me growing up as a very young child, from about the age particularly of 9, was my grandmother, Violet Sansom. My grandmother lived in this little house, which still exists today in Totnes, a little tiny house on the wall, as it was always called, in South Street in Totnes, if you know Totnes at all. And from the age of about 9 to my teenage years, I pretty much grew up in that house with my brother as well. The reason being is that my father had a breakdown when I was really young and suffered from very severe bipolar disorder, and that very much shaped a lot of what went on in our early lives, dealing with my dad's mental illness. And so we were really brought up by my grandparents, particularly my grandmother. And some of the things that I remember that I've been looking back fondly on over the last couple of years, because it really has helped shape my life, and you'll see the relevance of this as I go through my talk today, is how much my grandmother's influence, and I would describe it as leadership really, was the turning point for really helping to shape my life and help me out of a rut really, in terms of how I was as a very young child, very insecure, very nervous, very quiet. Used to hide myself away most of the time and really didn't feel that I had anything to say of any value to anybody, and so would tend not to speak. And my grandmother, over a period of years, would really patiently sit with me, ask me questions, encourage me, and basically I grew up in an environment where I felt like I was being listened to and supported in all of those things. And one of the things that I always remember very, very clearly, and my brother and I hold very dear to us, is that every week, without fail, when we did go back home briefly for periods of time, my grandmother would write to both of us separately a letter, post it, and we'd always receive a letter. It was quite a long letter, and it would be my gran recounting and describing the wonderful time that she'd had with us the previous week, and recalling all the things that had happened and all the really positive stuff, and how much she valued and loved us for who we were and what we brought to their lives. And you look back on those letters now and they're actually quite difficult to read. And a few years ago, I sat down and I reflected on what I'd actually learnt from my grandmother and how that had shaped my life. And there's lots of things, but to try and summarize it very simply, these are some of the key things that came out. What I realized very early on is that my grandmother saw my potential. I didn't see it. I didn't really know what I was going to do in my life. I really didn't see a direction or really a sense of what skills I had, or what I could do really in the world. But she saw my potential, and over a number of years of nurturing me, I really began to discover my true self. So I always say that my grandmother found me, found the true me, buried somewhere within the insecure little child that I was for many years. One of the values that's really stuck with me, that I use a lot in my own work, working with other people, is authentic listening. And I describe it as that because it's that listening that's really patient, that somebody sits down with you and really gives you their full attention, and they're listening beyond the words. They're trying to understand what's behind that in terms of the person, what's going on with you. And that really struck a chord with me. That's been very much part of my values and my approach with other people for the rest of my working life, at least, but also with my family and friends. The other thing that my grandmother gave both my brother and I was space to play and learn. And I think that, again, is a very good lesson to learn about how we can develop in organizations, giving space to people to try things out, to get better at stuff by being brave enough to have a go. And sometimes we're put in situations where we're not given that permission to actually just play and learn. And that's one of the things that my gran really encouraged of us. It wasn't a word that I knew at the time, but coming back to it now, and it's such a big word that's discussed a lot thanks to the likes of Brené Brown and Daring Greatly. But vulnerability is okay. To be able to say to people, actually, I'm not feeling okay today, or I'm not feeling confident about this, is actually a strength, is not a weakness. And it took many years for me to realize that. And again, it's something that is very much embedded in supporting other people, in understanding that vulnerability is not a bad thing. And the other thing that my grandmother did was, ultimately for me, is build a legacy of trust and appreciation, which was mutual. And again, for me, that's the fundamental pillar of working with other people, is that you've got to start from a position, particularly with people you don't know, of building a true relationship built on trust, so that people are open and honest with you, and you can continue to build on it for the future going forward, and to value what people do. So that appreciation and valuing, and telling people how much you value them, and specifically why, which is what my grandmother was doing in those letters, is really powerful. Like I say, Brené Brown, I'm a great fan of, I think she's been very brave and powerful in the things that she said, has talked a lot about vulnerability over the last few years, that has resonated with so many people. It's such a great quote. One of the things that fascinated me in later life, and I think it was born very much out about the way that you treat people and what you get from that. So if you treat people well, you get good stuff, and people will always go the extra mile. And if you treat people badly, there is no commitment there. They may do it under a compliance-based approach, but you won't get loyalty, and you won't get people going the extra mile for you. So one of the things that grabbed me very early on, and I'm sure a lot of people on the call today will be very familiar with Daniel Pink's work around drive. But when he looked at a lot of organizations in terms of the things that people really valued and motivated them, it boiled down to these three things: autonomy, mastery, and purpose. And I keep coming back to this because part of the work that we've been doing over the last few years is very much built around how can you create a culture where these things can thrive and grow. You need to give people permission, and people need to feel comfortable that they can go off and make decisions for themselves and own things, because you get so much better quality work out of people. And again, like my grandmother, giving you space to play and learn is very much how we get better at stuff. We have to do before we reflect, and then we realize, the things that we could improve. And then finally, purpose. I think purpose is such a driver, and it links so much to the whole project with 3D Crowd, which I'll talk about in a minute, because we need meaning in our life. We need something to get up for in the morning. And we have a very strong urge to contribute and add value to the world and to other people. I think that's really, really important. So a few years ago, through a series of eventful moments, which I haven't got time to go into here, I met a guy called Kevin Miller, and Kevin and I started conversing about our own experiences of working in different organizations, some good, some bad, and ultimately the impact it had had on us personally. And we found a lot of parallels in our lives, even though we're different ages, in terms of the experiences that we had. So we started a very long journey. It took over a year of lots of coffee break conversations, talking about, we really felt very driven to want to do something and make a small dent in the world with our own thoughts and ideas about this, but also to find out what other people were doing as well. So we created a movement called Humanising Workplaces, which was our starting point for all of this. And we have an anthem quote again from Brené Brown, which really kind of sums up what we're trying to do, and that is to really talk about culture in terms of how do we create environments where people bring their authentic selves to work, their whole selves to work. And you can only do that when you create an environment or a culture in which people feel safe, they're seen and heard and respected. I think that kind of just sums it up so beautifully. And sorry, I haven't got this photograph there. And one of the things that we started with was very much where do you start? So one of the questions that we were asked a lot was, okay, we want to do some culture change in our organization. Where do we really go with all of this? And we've discovered that actually the best place that you can start is by listening to the people in your organization. So we created, through the help of work with Barry Waymiller, which I'll talk about in a minute, something called Listening Plus sessions, which have a structure, but only have a structure to ensure that they're set up for success. And they ultimately are about getting a voice and hearing back from every single person in an organization to really get a sense, a very clear sense of what the culture is like in that organization, all the good, all the bad, all the bits in between. And what comes out of that is what we call a health report. And that could be an organizational health report or a team health report. And that report helps you to determine three key things, and that is looking for quick fixes or quick wins in your organization, small things you could change today that would really make a difference, short-term projects, and long-term change opportunities. That's the kind of things that start to fall out of those Listening Plus sessions. One of the interesting byproducts of that is it starts, in some organizations we've done it in, to start to build a new sense of conversation. So there's conversations right across the organization, and we've encouraged organizations to share many more stories within their organization. So, at manager level, at operator level, sharing stories that connect people with the organization, connect people with each other is really, really powerful. One of the sort of standing stones that we built Humanizing Workplaces on is thanks to the work of a wonderful guy that you may or may not have come across called Bob Chapman, CEO of Barry Waymiller. They were the ones that started listening sessions with all of their staff when they went through some major culture change in the late 90s, early 2000s. Bob charts the story of the culture change of Barry Waymiller through Everybody Matters, a wonderful book that really kind of encapsulates what they did. None of it is rocket science, but the difference with Bob is they did it, they made it happen, and the impact of culture change right across a global organization, it's a very big organization, has been absolutely staggering. And Bob actually is a real voice at the moment in the current COVID-19 crisis, really sharing an awful lot of support for other organizations in how you get through this by not sacrificing your staff, but looking after your staff all the way through. And I recommend Googling Bob to see one of the TED Talks he's done, or actually to buy the book and read the book yourself. Some of the things that Bob quotes, and we use it a lot in Humanizing Workplaces as a reference to Bob, is Bob's realization that you move away from seeing people as employees, job descriptions, just your staff, and actually seeing them as someone's precious child. Because he said, if you see them like that, once you've seen that, you don't unsee it. It's that thing of care. If you see them as someone else's precious child, then you're much more likely to care about them and actually look after them properly. The other thing that Bob talks about, and it's really a mantra in the organization, is we measure success by the way we touch the lives of people. That's their KPI, if you like, which is a really powerful one to think about. Oh, sorry. And the final one is leadership is the stewardship of the lives entrusted to you. That huge responsibility of being a leader and looking after people is so much greater than so many organizations tend to treat it as. And you can learn a lot of lessons from Bob Chapman and Barry Waymiller through that. We had the real privilege of going on a visit to a Barry Waymiller factory in Nottingham a couple of years ago. And on the visit, we met this guy, and he was a prime example of how culture change makes such a difference to us as people. He's worked for this organization for 26 years. And he said for 23 of them, it was under different ownership before Bob Chapman came along. And he said, and I would come in every day, I would clock in, I'd be given my notes of the work that I had to do, and I went and did it, and I went home and I clocked out. And he said, in all of those 23 years, I was never once asked my opinion about how we could improve things. I was just there to do my job. And he said 3 years ago, Bob Chapman took over the organisation, ripped out the clocking in machines, gave us full ownership of the areas that we worked on the factory floor. And he said, and we can make changes, we are autonomous, we have authority and responsibility. And he said, I really love coming to work now and really enjoy my job. One of the things that we've discovered in humanising workplaces, having worked with lots of organisations, and you may well have seen this chart before, is the early adopters group. We always call them the usual suspects. And I've seen a lot of usual suspects with the 3D Crowd project, I have to tell you, down in Devon and Cornwall, etc. And they're the people you really want on your side. So they're the people who are enthusiastic, give their all, fully committed, boundless energy, willing to overcome all the problems that you really want with you when you're trying to initiate some kind of culture change in your organisation. The biggest challenge, and I've experienced it myself many times, being an employee of organisations as well, when you're trying to make changes, is that chasm before you really can start to expand on developing the culture across an organisation. That's one of the biggest challenges, I think, and one of the biggest frustrations you can have. But if you've got champions on your side working with you, you are increasing the chances of success of developing that culture change. And linking this to where we've been over the past few weeks, which has been a very strange time, and I'm sure everybody relates to this completely, that it feels like we've been in this forever, and yet it's only a few weeks. But the thing that struck me and links very much back to humanising workplaces is how people have stepped up in a very, very difficult crisis time, have really made a difference in doing some incredible things. And it reminded me of this quote by Steve Jobs, that there are actually, there are people who sit on the sidelines of life and have opinions and comment and point the finger and criticize and, do all those sort of things. But the people that we're really interested in, and it's something that Brené Brown has challenged many times, is the people that get into the arena and actually feel the blood, sweat and tears and are willing to roll their sleeves up and actually get involved in stuff. And I've seen and experienced in this project in the last few weeks so many people that fit this description by Steve Jobs. So for me, I've been reflecting over the last couple of weeks particularly about looking back to the beginning of this crisis and with the world crashing down around us, and why do people choose to get involved in a project like 3D Crowd UK? I was one of those people. Literally, my business ground to a halt 2 days after that and first announcement back in March, and only a couple of days later, I was looking for a purpose. I was looking for something where I thought, I want to break out of just sitting at home. I need to be doing something that's going to help somehow in some small way make a difference to people on the front line. And I came across 3D Crowd's initial call to arms, if you like, right away, and instantly made a decision to be part of all of that. And I love from a guy called Sean Murphy, who wrote a book called The Optimistic Workplace. I think this describes so beautifully what we're in with all of this, that collaboration plus connection equals community. And if you read those descriptions, that's exactly what's been happening for the last few weeks and is happening right now, where, there is a participation of people working jointly together. There's a relationship between people focused on a common goal, and we've created a community of people with that shared interest who are doing some amazing things. It's a great descriptor that describes so well really what's going on. And it never ceases to amaze me how much people give unconditionally if it's for the right cause. This is a guy called Andy in Devon who I've picked up a few times from parts that he's made, And here's Andy not only handing over some parts, but actually giving away some filament. And this has been multiplied hundreds and hundreds of times, I know, right across the country. But the sheer generosity of people has been amazing. I look back on the last few weeks and realize, we've printed a lot of parts, like a lot of other people have. We've connected with dedicated makers all over the Southwest. We found drivers and creative routes and picked up from lots of different remote places. In the last few weeks, we've set up the Honiton Hub to serve Devon, Cornwall and Wiltshire in just a couple of days, thanks to East Devon District Council actually giving us loads of support and the space to do so, and so on and so forth. And I think, some of the things specifically as a shout out is people who've offered their help without being asked. I think about Matty Dredge, wonderful coordinator in Wiltshire, who rang me up at the very beginning because I think he could see from all my Slack questions that I was really lost trying to take on a coordinator role. And he kind of sprang to help, of his own volition. And we've become very good friends and we talk a lot on the phone. And he really helped me get up and running in a few days, just by making a decision to reach out and connect with me. The amount of people who've worked all hours to get work done, and they've worked long hours into the night to get machines working again and all sorts of stuff. I was blown away by the elastics run that happened from Nottingham to Devon a few weeks ago. I was the last person in the chain to receive elastic. It was organised in just one day and it all went into operation the following day on a Sunday, and it worked like clockwork in getting quite a quantity of elastic from Nottingham all the way down to various hubs and down to Devon. And I have to shout out to my daughter-in-law, Janelle, who's the queen of the elastic cutters, who has cut so much elastic for the hub and enabled us to make so many kits as a result. We couldn't have done it without you, Janelle. That's me and Darren outside East Devon Business Centre. And I have to give credit to my very good colleague, Darren Emerton, who, through a lot of hard work and creativity, has come up with the most amazing processes, like spinning closed baskets to actually dry things off quicker, closed dryers and curtain wires to actually be able to hang them up and let them dry quickly overnight from the Milton. Works such a treat and actually has improved the process and streamlined the process of our hub in Honiton incredibly in just a few days. I was reminded of this description of a wonderful organisation by Raj Sisodia, if you've come across Raj, who wrote the book Conscious Capitalism. And if you read it, I think it's a true reflection of what we're going through with this project. And I love the second sentence that says, their days race by in a blur of focus, intensity, collaboration and camaraderie. That's exactly, to me, how it feels. And I wanted to just show you a video that you may or may not have seen before by the staff of Dropbox in America, who were given the challenge of producing a video to share their thoughts and feelings about what it was like to work for Dropbox. So here it is.
Why do I love Dropbox? Boy, I mean, if you've got a few hours, I can go over it.
So why do I love Dropbox?
Why do I love Dropbox?
Why do I love Dropbox?
It's a really difficult question. Gotta be the people.
The people.
There's not a bad apple in the whole building. Dropbox is, everyone's positive. I feel like every time I come to work, it's just extremely positive.
I think it's a very human place, if that makes sense.
The culture of Dropbox is down to earth and magical. Lots of dedication, hard work, paired with a lot of fun at the same time.
It's also a culture where people want to deliver on results, but they also never take themselves too seriously. Dropbox is respectful of my time, not only here at work, but also at home.
There is a seamless integration between your life and your work.
It's just such a diverse group of people, and everyone comes together to create this all-star team.
I'm always surprised here at Dropbox.
There's a lot of talk at Dropbox about how great our perks are.
My very favorite perk at Dropbox is the tea and scones cart. You're just sitting there writing code, and all of a sudden this cart comes by your desk.
The gym is great. It's awesome. I really enjoy the gym and being able to work out and then pump iron.
There's a music room at the office, so I spend a bunch of time out there, late nights, playing guitar with folks from work.
The one thing that really attracted me to come to Dropbox was this belief that users really own their data.
It's not uncommon that I'm walking around and I have a Dropbox t-shirt on and somebody will stop me on the street and be like, I love what you build. And I love that. I just love knowing that what I'm building has so much impact on so many users.
One day Dropbox will be such an iconic name that I will look back and be so proud of myself for being a part of the journey.
It all goes back to empowerment and initiative. These things are just core to who we are and the kind of people we hire.
It's not only a place where I come to work, it's a place that I come to grow.
Oh my God, I love Dropbox. Is this interview over now? Okay, thanks.
So some lovely messages there, I think, that reflect some of the things we've been talking about. So in finishing my talk, I just wanted to say, through the legacy of my grandmother, Violet Sampson, I reflect on this, that if we start simply by building relationships with others, grounded in trust, we can definitely build amazing environments for our people to grow in and do amazing things. And if you look at the power of what has happened with 3D Crowd UK and this project, as a result of people from all different backgrounds and for different reasons getting involved and coming together to create this community, I think it's incredibly powerful. Thank you for your time today. It's been nice to be here. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Rob. So if anyone else has got any questions, put them in the comments below. To get us started, we've got one from Jake. What advice would you give someone who's struggling to find confidence in themselves?
I think it's a really valid question, Jake, and I would say don't keep it to yourself. The thing that I found, which for us guys particularly can be very difficult, but as I've done it, it's just got easier, is to talk to somebody else. It's that vulnerability thing again. Somebody that you trust. It doesn't have to be somebody that you work with. It doesn't have to be a family member. But if you find somebody that you really trust and value, it's finding an opportunity to talk through with somebody else to build your confidence and to talk about the things that make you feel less confident. If I was to say to you that I've stood in front of really big groups of people and spoken about something I'm really passionate about, if I was to analyze that very carefully, I would lose all my confidence thinking I'm going to be standing in front of a large group of people. But what I found was that being really passionate about what I talk about, you forget about yourself and you find yourself in situations where you can stand in front of people, and that confidence thing doesn't go away because you're sure about your message. But I would say very simply, it's don't keep it to yourself. Confidence building, the best way of changing that is being coached or mentored by somebody else that you trust and value. And it will take some time. It will be a series of things that to help build that up in small bits over a period of time. But I found for a long time, if you don't speak to somebody else and share that's that vulnerability, revealing yourself as to who you are and saying, actually, I don't feel that confident about this stuff. It's amazing how people will help and support you to build that confidence over a period of time.